Gift of the Raven Man. A man died somewhere nearby, too near, wasting his last breath on an inarticulate cry that only his killer and Liliana Vess could hear. Liliana hurried away from the sound, putting as many twisted trees between herself and the killer as she could. She'd grown up walking the tracks and trails of the Caligo Forest and knew them as well as anyone, certainly better than any of the soldiers fighting and dying under its branches now. Even at night, the woods felt like home to her, with owls and nightingales calling softly among the dark boughs. But on this night, the forest had become a battlefield, and the only calls were the screams of the dying and the harsh croak of ravens squabbling over the flesh of the dead. She stopped and listened, straining her ears for any sound of pursuit, some indication that she'd been detected. No human soldier came behind her, she was sure. Just one raven hopping and fluttering from branch to branch behind her, waiting for her to die.
Not tonight, bird. Joseph is depending on me.
The thought of her brother, delirious with fever as he lay on death's door back at their father's house, quickened her step, and soon the sounds of battle faded behind her. If no one else would brave the forest to find the Essus root that would cure him, then Liliana would.
I'm ready. I'll make him well, and together we'll crush these raiders.
The raven croaked. She stooped to the ground and picked up a pebble to throw at it, but when she lifted her head, the bird was gone. In its place stood a man, his features hidden in the shadows of his cowled coat. She threw the pebble anyway. It tapped his shoulder and fell back to the ground. He drew back his hood as Liliana fumbled with the knife at her belt. He was tall and had a noble air, dressed in a suit of black and gold that showed no signs of his passage through the trees and brambles. White hair crowned his head, tousled by his hood, but the hair at his temples was black and swept back over his ears. His eyes, strangely gold like the embroidery of his clothing, seized and held her gaze. "I'm not here to harm you, Liliana Vess."
You know my name. Somehow, that doesn't inspire me with trust.
Liliana was gripping her dagger. He held up his empty hands. "Your father is our Lord and General. Of course I know you.
You've been following me.
Like you, I'd rather lie low in the woods than end up a headless corpse dragged behind the horses of your father's foes, my skin stretched over their shields, and my skull dancing through the trees." As he spoke, Liliana thought she heard hoofbeats in the distance.
I have to go.
"But where will you go?"
The Glade.
"Where the Essus root used to grow?" She scowled.
How did you know? Wait. Used to grow?
"You don't know. They burned it.
The raiders?
Their skin witches did. It's a circle of ash now, where they chant their rites and raise more soldiers to fight your father."
No.
Turning her back on the strange man, she ran, heedless of the noise she made as she tore through the bushes and stumbled over roots. She smelled the smoke long before she reached the glade, and stopped her rush when she saw the light of gleaming embers. A raven's wings beat the air behind her, and she turned. The golden-eyed man stood, looking down at the ground. So much death. Liliana dropped her gaze and started in surprise when her eyes met those of a dead man lying at her feet. Corpses littered the ground, soldiers in her father's colors, black and gold. Some clutched horrible wounds, some carried terrible burns, and some were headless, their skin flayed off their glistening fat and muscle by the skin witch's dark magic. Not one carrion bird flapped among them, and without the Essus root, your brother will be next.
No, I am not going to let that happen.
No, you're not. The steady certainty of his voice only exacerbated the panic that pounded in Liliana's chest.
There has to be another way. More Essus root. Another glade.
You know there isn't another glade.
What are you saying?
Liliana fought the urge to slap the infuriating man.
You know another way to save Josu? What is it?
The man pointed in the direction of the glade. She turned and looked into the trees, where a dim glow of embers smoldered in the darkness. His voice was right behind her, his breath in her ear. You know. But she didn't know. For years she had studied faithfully at Liliana's side, memorizing the healing properties of roots and herbs, learning the signs and symptoms of hundreds of illnesses, and the best treatment for dozens of kinds of wounds. Essus root was the only possible cure.
You said the glade was burned, the root gone.
You know more than that. All of her studies, her lessons, the daily routines of crushing herbs and mixing potions, nothing else suggested a possible cure.
Unless...
You know. Of course. She nearly jumped at the unexpected thought. Over the years, she had expanded her studies beyond what Liliana could teach, dabbling in magic that took a more direct approach to life and death. All in service to her work as a healer, of course. She knew magic that could turn even a burned and shriveled Essus root into a cure for Josu. At least in theory. But how did he know that?
I'm not ready. I have so much more to learn.
I'm sure Josu will wait while you complete your studies. Liliana swore violently under her breath and pulled away from the man, taking a few steps closer to the burnt glade. He followed her, speaking right into her ear. You can't afford to wait, Liliana Veth. You know enough now. You're already a great mage, though you won't admit it yourself. And you will be greater still once you embrace your power. Her panic was changing, turning into a heady rush of excitement. She was powerful, but she had always hidden her forbidden knowledge away, afraid of censure. To embrace it, damn the consequences. She had to admit that, like other forbidden things, exulting in the power sounded like fun. She wheeled on him, planting a hand on his chest and pushing him back.
How do you know so much about my magic?
She could feel the magic surge inside her, the chill prickle of death's approach. I suppose both of us are more than we seem. Liliana had always known it. She was more, so much more than anyone had ever seen in her before. And now she would prove it. She felt something inside her break free, like a dark flower blossoming in a deep swamp. Spells came to her mind, weaving together into a desperate, terrifying plan. Yes, you see it now. Essus root is a powerful cure, but it was the safe course. You know a mightier one. She did, she realized with surprise. Stretching out her senses, she felt the power that brewed in all the rots and decay of the nearby bog. She drew the mana into herself with a grim smile, only vaguely aware that the strange man had vanished again. With each step forward, the power that had broken free inside her seemed to blossom a little more, solidifying her resolve. It propelled her, urging her to embrace her strength. A dozen paces brought her out of the sheltering trees and into the clearing. It was now a blasted circle of ash, smoldering embers in a ring around the edge. Terror struggled with fury in her heart as she took in the scene, remembering the peaceful glade it had once been. 3 withered crones stood back to back in the center, eyes closed as they sent their spells winging through the wood to the battlefields across her father's lands. 3 ghastly sentinels, grisly skulls with dangling bits of flesh, sickly purple light gleaming in their empty eye sockets, floated around the periphery. 6 foes, and Liliana stood alone. But Jasu's life depended on her, and the power blossoming within her was more than enough. Liliana cooed.
Hello, ladies.
One of the floating skulls bobbed toward her, a ghostly shriek rising from its gaping, fleshless mouth. She answered it with a chant of her own, a string of low syllables that echoed in the dead air. A knife of utter blackness shot from her outstretched finger and stabbed through the skull, severing the necromantic energy that gave it the semblance of life, and it tumbled to the ground. The skin witches opened their milk-white eyes and turned to her as one. Twice more Liliana pointed, and the 2 remaining skulls fell into the ash, kicking up little clouds where they landed.
I think you need some stronger bodyguards.
Her confidence was building, replacing her fear with cold resolve. She was good at this, she realized. It was so easy, once she embraced it, so much easier than her dreary studies under Liliana, and it felt so good. The skin witches began a chant, their 3 voices speaking as one, and pain danced over Liliana, like claws tracing marks in her flesh. She screamed, but she turned her scream into another spell, using the pain to focus her mind. The spell rolled from her mouth like the tolling of a bell, and a deadly chill soothed her burning skin as her magic took shape. 3 spectral hands floated up from the ground at the crone's feet, trailing wisps of shadow like ghostly arms. Now, it was the witch's turn to howl in pain, as the hands disappeared into their chests and emerged from their backs, clutching glowing motes of golden light. Their screams turned to pathetic moans as they sank to the ground, clutching their chests with what little strength Liliana's spell had left them. One skin witch stretched out a hand toward her and mumbled something that might have been a spell, but Liliana felt nothing. The 3 spectral hands converged on one spot near Liliana's feet and dived back into the earth with their prizes. With a smirk, Liliana started to bend down, but the harsh croak of a raven behind her startled her, and she spun around. One of the corpses she had seen outside of the glade was on its feet now, shambling towards her.
So you cast a spell after all.
She had called to the skin witch behind her.
A valiant effort, but I think it was your last.
With a deep breath, she focused her will and simply snuffed out the semblance of life that animated the zombie's flesh. Behind her, the witch gave a strangled cry. Liliana looked down at the soldier's body, his torn armor, and his blood-stained uniform.
So much death.
She lifted her eyes and met the gaze of the raven perched above her.
And this is just the beginning.
At her feet, a golden glow emerged from the ash where the spectral hands had sunk. Sinking to her knees, she plunged her own hand into the ground and seized her prize. When she lifted her hand again, it clutched a shriveled, blackened chunk of Essus root, glowing softly gold. It would make a potion far more powerful than what she'd originally planned, infused with the life she'd stolen from the skin witches. The man had been right. She'd known what to do. Of course she'd known. Cradling the root to her chest, she walked back into the forest towards her father's house. She grinned up at the bird as she passed it. It is now time for the spookiest of months. October is upon us, and so I thought we would do the spookiest of planeswalkers. Liliana Vess is an interesting planeswalker, as she has never cared to be the hero, and yet often winds out to be the one. However, her dark origin story shows that she did not always make the right choice. We've been scripting, recording, and putting together so many amazing videos, and are excited to show them to you all here in the coming weeks. This weekend, we'll have the first of 2 unboxing videos coming out, and next week, we'll finally be getting the Chandra lore video that I've been working on. We also have so many others, including a video about who we are, a more in-depth breakdown of the lore and Artseeker. And speaking of the Artseeker, she's been hard at work creating some cool Throne of Eldraine videos, breaking down the showcase cards. That should be coming out soon. In all, we are putting out more content this month and hoping to finally begin getting ahead of ourselves in our recording. We hope that you like this video, and if you did, leave a like or a comment letting us know. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing that and hitting the bell icon to get notified whenever we get a new video out. And as always, seek on.